Call to order the meeting of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers, December 14th, 2023. All managers are present except Manager Miller. There is no member of the public here, so we'll move to item 3, which is approval of the agenda. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Manager Maxwell. Is there a second?
Second.
Manager Olson, seconds. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? On the consent agenda tonight, we have approval of the November 27th board meeting minutes and 7 resolutions. 74 is recognition for David Altman's service on the CAC. 75 is recognition for Cassie Ordway's service on the CAC. 76 is authority to execute a contract for the Watershed Quality Lab analysis. 77, selection and authorization to execute a contract for government relations services. 78, selection and authorization to execute a contract for engineering services. 79, selection and authorization to execute a contract for accounting services. And the resolutions on the surety return project update. 80 authorizes set cash sureties to be sent to the unclaimed property fund, and 81 is an authorization to true up the accounts at the bank. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move approval.
Manager Olson moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Manager Sando seconded. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I loved seeing the surety item. That was a task that's really come to maturity or whatever. For my report, I will say that I attended 3 meetings and an event in the last 2 weeks. The first was the annual meeting, and Manager Sando and Olson and I will report on that in a few moments. The second was that during the conference, James Whisker and I had a remote meeting with Commissioner Gotel, who is knowledgeable and supportive of watersheds, and we were able to update her on some of our projects, and she reminded us that in redistricting, she has parts of neighborhoods in Minneapolis, part of Lyndhurst, Armitage, and Kennedy, I think she said. And then the policy steering committee met with managers Hedgemati and Miller and I, and Mr. Whisker will be updating us later. The event was a ribbon cutting at the Chorus Apartments, which is 325 Blake Road. They pulled it together really fast. We didn't have time to publish it as a public meeting, and so Mr. Heyman and I went to that meeting. Okay, the Operations and Programs Committee report, Manager Loftus.
Yes, thank you, President White. We had one agenda item this evening, and we received a summary from the outreach staff on the outcomes of the municipal elections for 2023, and then our government relations consultant, Joel Carlson, gave us a legislative update, and we had some brief discussion about future connections and some forecasting or reminders of how we might approach our legislative needs, and it was a good overall summary and look ahead. So thank you to staff for putting that together.
The next report is on the Minnesota Watersheds Annual Conference. I'm going to start with Manager Sando.
Thank you. Board members and staff, Sherry, Bill, and I attended the Watershed Conference in Alexandria on November 28th, 4 days. You could choose seminars to go to each day. They all were very educational and informative. I went 3 to 4 seminars per day. A very important seminar I attended was One Watershed, One Plan, which meant if your project overlapped into another district, you included that district to avoid duplication and to provide a better outcome. I also went to a seminar on working with your fellow board members in a collaborative way, and that was just excellent. We talked about flood reduction at these meetings, addressing the floods potential before it becomes an issue. I also was very impressed how many groups of like mind that were involved in protecting our land and water, all pulling on the same yoke. The keynote speaker was climatologist Mark Seeley, who has been around for 30 or 40 years, and he spoke again on the weather change, longer droughts, and about flooding events that are predicted to come up. I really thank you for sending me to this seminar, and also I was a delegate. The information I took away is going to help be very helpful on future decisions I'll make. So it was a very productive 4 days. I look forward to attending more of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Manager Olson.
Thank you. The things that stood out, there were no fewer than 3 different salt concern presentations where companies are trying to do their best to limit the amount of salt that they put on the roads in the wintertime and how it adversely affects the water. There are people walking around with their teaspoons around their neck, and this little itty-bitty teaspoon is all it takes to take a 5-gallon pail from Home Depot and poison that water for life, the way we know it up here. So it was very kind of a dramatic reminder every time you're talking to somebody that they're aware of it. Rice Creek Watershed also did their climate resiliency plan, and they are developing modeling. It's an interesting idea. I think it'll serve them well. But they want to know the rainfall depths, future results, future conditions, rainfall amounts, flood control, all the things that we're trying to do with our 2D model. We also had the opportunity to go see a presentation put on by one of the engineering companies where they have multiple 2D XP swim analyses that have been done for cities. There's also the ICM licenses that go along with it, so they're using a combination of ICM and XP swim. And again, that's something we have evaluated and are incorporating that ability in our upcoming 2D model. But what I found fascinating was when they showed their result for one of the cities, it had the entire community, and then they could sit there and literally dial up the intensity of the rainfall, and you could see the blue starting to flood in different areas, where it would flood, how it would flow, in one direction, and then as it storm sewers would keep up with it, it would flow back in the other direction. And I found that very fascinating that in that graphic way, people would be able to politically understand the consequences of not addressing flood control and the inability of some storm sewers to handle that flooding. So the ability to model in that graphic way was really stunning, and it confirmed that what we're doing and what we're trying to do is the right thing. So kudos to our people who are working hard on having that be an offering that we have for all of our constituents. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. The business meeting, or first of all, the Region 3 meeting, caucus, the caucus elected a WMO commissioner from Bassett Creek to the Minnesota Watershed Board, and it was the first time that a WMO representative was on the board. Part of why the name was changed to Minnesota Watersheds is because of that expanded encompassing different kinds of watershed organizations. So we thought that was a real good thing. The resolutions all passed, sort of. Resolution 1, which was about having the DNR be required to get permits, was amended so that it says required watershed district permits for all state agencies, not singling out any one. Resolution 2, which was about the deadlines for certifying budget and truth and taxation hearings and those, how watersheds don't match up necessarily. That was tabled indefinitely. And then passed were one concerned with public drainage maintenance and repairs, streamlining DNR flood hazard mitigation grant program, increased flexibility in the open meeting law to utilize interactive technology, and seeking watershed education outreach to encourage formation of watershed districts in unserved areas. And I thank Managers Sando and Olson for being the delegates there as we voted on those. I am an alternate on the resolutions committee next year. And I'll leave it at that. What?
I was going to say, there was also a really fun luncheon that we attended.
Indeed.
Where we were very proud to listen to Michael Heyman get the Employee of the Year award in the state of Minnesota. So kudos to Mike. I see he's online right now. But that really was a well-deserved award. And it drove home the fact that we weren't in Hawaii at the time, but he was. And we were glad he was having a good time with his family, so.
But his speech made me cry.
Yes.
The Outstanding Employee of the Year gave an outstandingly gracious and touching speech.
More than just us.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll bet a third of that room had tears in their eyes.
That was lovely.
Is there tapes of that?
I believe at an upcoming meeting, we'll get a chance to
Oh,
see it.
okay. So I should bring some Kleenex that night.
I should have. He was wondering.
For all of the educational and networking value, I think my highlights were Mike getting that award and
Yes.
Mark Seeley speaking. Those were the things I liked best. Okay then, the upcoming meeting and event schedule is in our agenda. Manager Maxwell is the liaison for the CAC meeting in January, and there's, I am the liaison for the Minnesota Watersheds Metro meeting in January. We will now open the public hearing for the annual, the public hearing for the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. Ms. Menden. This is your first board presentation. Happy to see you there.
Sorry, we're working with the Zoom on the
No
TV.
worries.
Something's coming. Here we go. Yeah.
President White and Board of Managers, tonight we are providing the opportunity for individuals to comment on the district's Stormwater Pollution Prevention Program, or SWIP, which is a requirement of the district's MS4 permit. MCWD is the drainage authority for 8 public drainage systems, therefore we are required to have an MS4. For some context, an MS4 is a municipal separate storm sewer system. These are conveyances that are owned or operated by a public entity. This map shows the district's responsibilities. So we have 6 ditches, which are shown as the purple lines, and 2 ponds, which are the red dots. The goal of the MS4 permit is to reduce sediment and other pollutants entering state waters from the stormwater systems. Part of this permit is the development of a SWIP, which is included in the board packet. As part of our SWIP, we are required to maintain records and perform activities under these 6 minimum control measures. This annual hearing is part of number 2, public participation. And this, among other items, are required to comply with our permit. To give adequate notice of this public hearing, we have advertised it in the Star Tribune, as well as posted it on our new website. And to date, we have not received any public input.
Is there a motion to adopt the resolution? I beg your pardon, I'm in the wrong place. This is just the public hearing. Does the board have any questions at this time? I have one. There were a couple of answers where They asked if there was a map or a list of priority areas. What does that look like, and is it something that I or a public member can access?
Yes, you can access it. It's all on our website. We have this map.
Okay, so that's what it needs to say, priority areas. All right then. We'll close the public hearing. Thank you very much. Item 11.1 is Resolution 23082. Ms. Sweet presenting.
Here. All right, President White, Board of Managers, I'm pleased to be in front of you tonight to request authorization to execute a winter carp removal contract with WSB. So first, as a reminder, we closed the Lessard Sands grant earlier this year in June. So tonight I'm just going to briefly walk us through what our current goals are now for the program, where we're sitting as far as carp status for the biomass in our lakes, a little bit more specifically about the population estimates in Parley and Mud and some of the challenges we've been having out there, and then go into the contract that's before you tonight. So now that the Lessard Sands grant is complete, we are shifting our focus to assess the response of our work to the water quality, assessing the response to the carp management on the water quality and the vegetation. We're also wanting to tell our story, our achievements and our lessons learned to our partners, public agencies, and the public. And then of course we also want to make sure we're maintaining the infrastructure that we've installed and continuing to keep the carp biomass under control to ensure continued success. So to look at where the status for our carp population, I'll show you these probably familiar carp biomass maps showing where we began in 2016, where we had very high carp populations across the board in all of our 6-mile lakes, to now where we are in 2023, where we've met the goals on the majority of our lakes. The blue and yellow lakes is where we've met our goals. But you will notice that Parley and Mud are still there in the orange category, which means that they have a moderate to high carp population level. That system, the Parley and Mud, actually began with the highest carp population. So although we've done a lot of work out there, even when we were closing the grant, we knew we still were going to have more removal efforts that we need to make on those lakes. So I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail on the population estimates that we've done on Parley and Mud. First of all, these lakes are somewhat unique. They're connected by a fairly short channel, so carp can move back and forth very easily. In fact, when the U of M was doing their research, they saw a lot of movement back and forth very frequently, and they recommended that we view these lakes as one system and make sure that when we're assessing the population that we assess those together. So to do a population estimate, we use our electrofishing boat to get out there and do an electrofishing survey. The standard protocol that's recommended is to do 3 surveys on each lake throughout the summer. So for 2023, for our electrofishing estimates, on Parley, we got out there 4 times actually, but had kind of a wide range in the numbers of carp we were catching, which has led to a wider range in the carp biomass, from a little over 200 to potentially 450 kilograms per hectare. Also, kind of unfortunately, due to the low water level, we haven't been able to get into Mud Lake. We use that channel, the only way to get into Mud is through the channel from Parley, and due to the drought, we just haven't been able to get our boat out there. So we don't know what's going on out on Mud exactly. So right now we do know that the carp populations are high and that we need to do a removal, but we don't know exactly how high, which has led to having a removal goal of a fairly wide range, from potentially either 30,000 pounds of carp to 90,000 pounds of carp that we'll need to remove. To reduce this variability in the future, I've added into the scope this year the option for us to start the initial phase of a mark recapture study. This will involve marking and releasing a subset of the carp that we catch, and then during future removals, the recapture rate will be able to give us a more accurate population estimate. And of course, we'll continue doing our electrofishing surveys too. This will just give us another data point to be able to get that population a bit more refined. So now to the main event. This winter we'd like to pursue another winter seine on Parley. We've been very successful with seines on Parley. We've done 3 seines over the past 5 years and removed 140,000 pounds of carp out there. So this contract is set up very similar to how we've had success in the past. We will be paying the commercial fishermen a lump sum of $4,000 to mobilize them to get out onto the lake and conduct the seine. And this is gated at a few checkpoints so that we can give approval to them at various points to proceed if we are viewing the carp aggregations and we think it's going to be successful. We also have a carp bounty of 25 cents per pound with a max of 15,000 that the carp fishermen can pursue. So this really incentivizes them to be successful in their carp seining. There's also an hourly not to exceed of close to $6,000 that goes to WSB, and that's for their work in coordination with the commercial fishermen, helping us out on the ice, do the measurements, just generally facilitating the whole event. And then the mark recapture study that I mentioned would be an additional $750. We do have this listed as an optional task in this budget, just in case we don't catch a lot of carp. We wouldn't want to necessarily do that work, but if we catch a fair number, we'll pursue the mark recapture. So right now there's a total not to exceed of $25,000, $748. You will notice that this is a little over $25,000. We unfortunately weren't able to get other bids for this work, and that's just because of the way carp fishing is set up in this state. So the DNR actually assigns each region one commercial fisherman that has the rights to the fish in those lakes, which in effect gives them a monopoly, basically. And then WSB is the only firm that has developed a relationship with these commercial fishermen that provides us the ability to contract with them. So at this current point in time, there's no real other options to pursue a winter seine. Yeah. So with that, I would like to request authorization for $25,748, and I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Sweet. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
So
Manager
second.
Hitchmati moves, Manager Maxwell seconds. Questions for Ms. Sweet?
With Mud Lake being down like it is there any way to get in there? I would think being down would be easier to trap the carp. Is that true?
Great question, Manager Sando. Yes, there's a potential that they could get cut off in Mud Lake and not be able to remove, and potentially they could winter kill of their own accord. That might have happened the last few years, but it's been a little bit tricky to tell just based on not being able to get in there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there any provision for unsafe ice? Here we are in the 14th with no ice.
Yeah, yep, so President White, we're not able to pursue the seine until there's enough ice out there because the commercial fishermen do have to drive fairly large trucks and equipment out on the ice.
Mm-hmm.
So normally we end up doing this in end of January to early February once there's enough ice. But yes, if we have had cases in the past where there's been times when we've had too much snow and that's caused slush problems with the ice, and the commercial fishermen decide that they can't pursue it.
Okay.
So yeah, we just wouldn't pursue anything then at that point.
It just wouldn't happen. Anything else? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Ms. Mall is presenting Resolution 2384.
Good evening, President White, Board of Managers. Tonight I am before you to recommend the appointment of the 2024 Citizens Advisory Committee with Resolution 2384. Minnesota Statute 103D 331 requires the annual appointment of the Citizens Advisory Committee. We'll begin by recapping the realignment efforts that were done in 2021 to realign the CAC to best support our balanced urban ecology approach and our strategic priorities of capital projects and policy planning. This involved focusing the CAC's role on stress testing and red teaming our initiatives. Realignment also established a goal of achieving geographic, professional, and demographic diversity, as well as setting the size of the CAC at 14 members and instituting 2-year staggered terms to help balance the continuity of fresh perspectives and more tenured experience. This fall, we conducted a recruitment and appointment process to prepare for the annual appointment. In August, an online application form was created to optimize our candidate analysis. The questions used were pretty similar to what we did in past years, but were refined over time to more closely align with the evaluation criteria that we use. New members were then recruited through a multi-channel public process from September 5th to October 16th. The application was posted to our website. We also engaged staff, current CAC members, and some of our partners to help distribute the call for applicants. Staff also explicitly shared the application with past CAC applicants to encourage them to reapply again. A demographic questionnaire was also included as part of the application to help track toward our goal of diversity in the CAC, and then a position description was also distributed with the application to help summarize the duties of our CAC members. In November, staff compiled the applications that we received and developed some preliminary recommendations for discussion at the November 9th, 2023 Operations and Programs Committee meeting. So tonight I'm requesting the appointment of the 2024 CAC based on the recommendations that we discussed back in November. In our analysis of the 2024 CAC applicant pool, staff evaluated applications for appointment based on these criteria. We strongly consider the background of our candidates, which helps us determine whether they will add value, a new perspective, or a diversity to the CAC as a representative of our watershed constituency. We also consider whether the applicant can demonstrate an ability to think at a systems-wide or regional scale, so we can maintain a focus on our strategic priorities for the watershed as a whole. Finally, staff review past community participation to determine whether the candidate has experience working with others in similar settings. We also consider the geographic distribution of CAC members to ensure that we continue to maintain a balance between upstream and downstream membership, while ensuring that our communities are well represented, especially those in which we have projects moving. So based on our staggered term cycling, in 2024 we have 6 CAC members that are simply continuing their terms, and then we have 8 vacancies for the remaining spots. This includes seats that were left vacant by Mark Rosenberg, who passed away this past year, as well as Cassie Ordway and David Oltmans, both of whom are stepping down from the CAC after long, impactful tenures. And resolutions of recognition for both of them were on the consent agenda earlier tonight. So this year we received 12 applications for those 8 spots. 5 applications were received from current CAC members who wish to be reappointed to a new term from 2024 to 2025. And then we had 7 applications that were received from other residents throughout the watershed, shown here as new applicants. As you can see, we received a majority of applicants from Minneapolis, but we do have some representation in the upper watershed as well. And then this map visualizes the geographic distribution of this applicant pool for those 8 open seats. We have our incumbent applicants in blue and then our new applicants in orange. Based on our discussion at the November 9th OPC meeting, where we shared highlights from all the applications we received, we're recommending the appointment of all of those listed here in green for those 8 vacancies. Firstly, we're recommending that all 5 interested incumbents are reappointed. They're all in good standing, regularly attend, and meaningfully contribute at each of our meetings. We're also recommending the appointment of 3 new competitive applicants. So Cara Donovan first from Minneapolis. She's a Minnesota water steward. She's also works in the natural resource field in her job. She's an urban and environmental planner, and the organization she works for has a very similar focus in terms of balanced urban ecology. In fact, in her application, she spoke about the importance of partnership to stack economic, social, and environmental benefits. So we feel she would be well aligned here. Our next applicant we're recommending for appointment would be Janet Schaefer, who is a resident of Long Lake. She's a member of the Long Lake Waters Association and has worked collaboratively with MCWD on the Long Lake Creek Roadmap. She also previously served as the mayor of Long Lake and was recommended by Cassie Ordway, who's stepping down. She would provide some needed upper watershed representation on the CAC with Cassie's resignation. Sherry Wallace is the final new applicant that we're recommending. She is a resident of Mound and an active member, in fact, I think president of the Harrison's Bay Lake Association. She's got a strong understanding of water resource management and is excited to see how the district will advance priorities in Painter Creek, which is a designated area for our comprehensive plan. We were able to appoint 14 members, so there are obviously a few applicants that we are not recommending for appointment, but we will continue to maintain our strong focus on establishing a bench of CAC applicants who are interested in our work and want to stay engaged, as well as maintaining engagement with our CAC alumni who are stepping down this year and in past years. So continue to encourage some of these applicants who aren't being recommended to continue engaging with us and reapplying in future years. This map here shows the location of the CAC appointment recommendations. We have those listed in blue here as CAC applicants recommended for appointment, and then the few in orange are not recommended, and then we have Henry LaBaggia in gray, who technically falls outside of the legal MCWD boundary, so he was not eligible for appointment. As you can see here, the applicants recommended for appointment would ensure balanced representation within all of the communities that we're working in. So Minnehaha Creek Subwatershed, the 6 Mile Creek Halstead Bay Subwatershed, Painter Creek Subwatershed, and Long Lake Creek Subwatershed. If you appoint the 2024 CAC, according to the recommendations presented here tonight, this would be the new composition of our 14-member Citizens Advisory Committee with their respective terms. So we have those 6 members that are continuing their terms in 2024, and then the 8 members who will be appointed to new 2-year terms from 2024 to 2025. And this would be the geographic distribution of the 2024 CAC. Unless there are any remaining questions, staff requests that you take action to appoint these applicants to the 2024 CAC with Resolution 2384.
Thank you, Ms. Mull. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Manager Sando moves. Is there a second?
Hishmati.
Hajmati seconds. Questions for Ms. Mull?
So they start January 1?
Yes, they'll attend our first meeting on January 17th, and then we typically provide a brief onboarding experience before that first meeting, and then a few meetings after that where they can learn more about our work. So.
I noticed, though, that this is 6 and 8, and I thought we were supposed to have 7 and 7 of our overlapping classes.
Yes, thank you, President White. Great question. That is the goal of our staggered recruitment cycles. It hasn't worked out perfectly that way just due to people stepping down early. David Oltmans, for example, was supposed to be continuing his term in 2024, so that would have made it a more even balance of 7 and 7. But because he opted to step down for this year, we have 8 vacancies to fill. But hopefully over time we'll get closer to that 7 and 7 balance.
Thank you. Anything else? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Under board inquiries, issues, and ideas, are there any ideas that managers would like to put forward at this time? All right, then we'll move to the staff update on the Minnehaha Preserve Boardwalk reconstruction. Ms. Shelford.
Good evening, President White and Board of Managers. Tonight, I'm in front of you with something of a milestone progress report on the Minnehaha Preserve Boardwalk reconstruction. This evening, I plan to provide background information and a status report on the process to document the defective work, the status of reviewing the proposed corrections to that defective work, and then how the coordination has been progressing with JTS, the district's contractor. So the bottom line is that while there's been some movement within the last week, which we'll talk about in a minute, overall staff remains frustrated regarding the pace and progress and the lack of proactive communication from JTS. And we want the board to understand the status, as we assume you share the frustration, and in the event that you have questions or directions for staff this evening. First, I'm going to cover documenting the defective work. As you know, since discovering the defective work earlier this year, we have worked through the guidance of the contract specifications to document all the deficiencies thoroughly. That was completed by SRF on June 9th through the issuance of a defective work notice and was amended with supplemental information by SRF on June 30th. Both of those documents were provided to JTS. And in those defective work notices, SRF identified 11 categories of defective work that were all departures from the plan and specifications. Following this notice, it became JTS's responsibility, that's the contractor, to correct the work promptly, and it gave JTS the right to propose and seek district and city approval of alternative means to correct that defective work. So as we've communicated previously through administrator report updates, 9 of the 11 categories of defective work, JTS has proposed to meet plans and specifications. Of course, this doesn't require any further approval from the Watershed District SRF or City of St. Louis Park. However, since the contract deadline for completing the work was on June 30th, that has left 2 remaining categories of defective work. One dealing with the gaps between the header and the joist, and one dealing with the use of shims on the joist hangers that were installed too low. For these 2 defects, JTS has proposed alternative means to correct. Again, under the contract, JTS was subject to time constraints on requesting approval of these alternative means to correct this defective work. For these categories, JTS has struggled over time to prepare and submit the required technical support for their proposed alternatives. Those submittals are needed and required by the contract documents to allow SRF to make an engineering determination, and also for the City of St. Louis Park to determine if they meet state code. This has been a running issue since early October, and particularly since October 9th. And throughout this time, the district has maintained positive, proactive communications and continued to emphasize the need to JTS for active and positive forward movement. While JTS has been nudging along the alternatives for these 2 outstanding deficiencies, from a contract deadline standpoint of June 30th, JTS has been incurring financial penalties, which we had hoped would be incentivizing them regarding their pace. First, JTS has been incurring $100 a day in liquidated damages, which now totals $16,800. And second, whenever a contractor proposes alternatives, then they're responsible for the district engineering and legal fees to review those deficiencies related to the defective work. Those now total $53,535 as of today. As part of the movement towards the required technical submittals, on October 6th, MyTech, which is a hanger manufacturer that JTS has opted to use, did submit technical information to SRF or engineer to support JTS in their proposed alternative corrections. However, per the contract, SRF needs direction from the actual contractor, not a manufacturer, that the submittals are submitted on behalf of the contractor before it engages. Until this week, JTS has remained unresponsive to requests to affirm that the MyTech submittals were submitted on behalf of JTS. And aside from SRF's review, JTS also independently needs to be coordinating the requests and alternatives with the City of St. Louis Park for their concurrence. Meanwhile, as we've been waiting for just a simple confirmation that the MyTech submittals were submitted on behalf of JTS, on October 26th, JTS obtained legal counsel. And that legal counsel instructed us that he would need time to get up to speed. And at the time, the district viewed engagement of JTS legal counsel as a positive step, and hoping it would bring order, clarity, and pace to JTS. To assist in that regard, district legal counsel reached out to provide a chronological summary and situation report. And this report and subsequent communications have signaled the district's growing impatience and encouraged JTS to engage in resolving the issues. Most recently, district legal counsel has communicated that the longer that this draws on, the more likely it is that the Watershed District Board could consider the options of initiating default and turning to JTS's performance fund. After After receiving the MITEC submittals on October 26th, just this week, on December 13th, yesterday, JTS's attorney reached out to affirm that the MITEC submittals that were provided on October 26th are indeed submitted on behalf of JTS and that SRF can begin their review. This is the first substantive communication from JTS or its attorney since the end of October, and has now allowed SRF to begin the review and move forward the alternative review process. So where does that leave things now? So SRF has affirmed their review and confirmed that they have begun their review and anticipate completing that quickly, sometime early next week. Separately, communication has gone out to JTS that they also must submit and seek approval from the City of St. Louis Park for their alternatives, as we have not had any evidence to show that they have done this yet. And what I want to end with saying is, again, I want to note that overall staff and legal counsel are frustrated regarding the lack of pace and proactivity in communication. And over the next 2 weeks, we'll do our best to advance work with JTS, just as we have this, I guess, entire fall. And of course, we can provide an update to the board at the December 28th board meeting, and if you would like, discuss next steps the district may take. So that concludes my update tonight of walking through how the watershed has worked to document the defective work, how we've been working with JTS to try to understand their proposed corrections and alternatives to the corrections, and how we've been working with their attorney to try to drive pace. And with that, I can take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Schaufler. Questions for her? Bill?
How much of their money are we holding right now?
President White, Manager Olson, we are holding, they are due, so they're still due. We've been, let me start over. We've held $83,000 in retainage, and then they're also due another between $240,000 to $280,000 in construction that they've completed. So that puts you at about $240,000 to $280,000 owed to them.
And then the 16,800 and the 53,535 is just on paper, waiting.
So Manager Olson, managers, so the board has at the end when the final pay request becomes before the board has the right to then decide if they want to waive or actually charge the liquidated damages, and also if they want to waive or charge those district engineering and legal fees that have been becoming incurred as we're reviewing the defective work.
Okay, so they're on paper, but we haven't pulled the money out or moved it or.
Correct.
Have we ever, or why would anyone ever waive those? Under what circumstances? I mean, these are all the contractors' steps, right? Or penalties for their default. It's not, is there you mentioned waiving versus charging them. I'm trying to understand why someone would waive that. Or is that just a request the contractor makes?
Manager Loftus, managers, I can look to legal counsel, but in understanding the different scenarios that could be, it could be that the contractor could propose some sort of situation where then the board might consider waiving those things as part of a negotiation.
Are they still?
Oh, go ahead.
No, are they still talking about getting it done this winter, or they want to wait till spring?
President and Manager Waxwell, they've just been unresponsive since the end of October, so the communication that we received yesterday from their attorney was the first that we've received, so it's just unclear what the plan is at this point. We're trying to get through the gate of getting the corrections approved.
Just say they wait till spring. Is it still $100 a day, the fine then? That'll add up all the way through spring.
Correct.
So next time, should we note it should be $200 or $500 a day? I mean, it's not enough to get their attention, right? I mean, I'm not asking you that, but in theory, I'm asking like, well, the whole point of those damages is to get the project we paid for done on time and what we asked for. And they're still somehow able to drag it along without too much concern about the $100 a day penalty. It's not serving its intent, I guess, if we're sitting here 6 months later after default and it's just, the bill's running up, but the work's not done. I mean, we want the work done, right? That's the ultimate goal, and we want it done without defect. There's real consequences if we aren't stewards of, the public using this amenity and spending public dollars to get it constructed. I mean, it has to be done right. And I think it sounds like staff has done everything within your patience and ability to move this along. I'm curious to know, like you mentioned, when and how they're reaching out to the city, because it won't be just our review.
Yeah, President White, Manager Loftus, that's something we've requested.
Yeah.
Also, confirmation that that's happening. There's been 3 things that we've requested from them. One is, please confirm that the MyTech submittals are submitted on your behalf so we can move that forward. We've also requested confirmation that they've begun coordination with the city, so we know that that's happening in parallel. Mm-hmm. And then we've also requested an installation plan, so we understand how all the corrections are going to be implemented, just to understand the sequence and means and methods, and to Manager Maxwell's question, when and how long is this going to take. So we got go ahead on the first one of the technical information we were looking for, but those other 2 we haven't gotten responses on.
Yeah, and I don't want to get into the details of what's wrong, but I also don't want to end up with an inferior product, which is why the review by SRF is so important, and it's so important for that to be proven, and also for the contractor to have to pay for that, in my opinion, because it wasn't built how we asked for it to be built, right? How we all agreed they would build it, and now we're being asked to do it in a different way. It needs a third party to say, this is going to meet the needs. It's going to keep the public safe. It's going to make this boardwalk usable for a reasonable amount of time. So all of that makes me very uncomfortable, but I appreciate the process that our attorney and staff has gone through to try and work with the contractor to say, look, you got 9 of the 11, but you still have these 2 big things, and they're pretty important. I mean, we can't just slough it off as no big deal, and not that you are, but it's just disappointing, and obviously there's a lot of people who love this boardwalk and want to use it again, and we thought we were getting it up and running this year, and it's not. So I guess to your last point, I'm very supportive of, staff exploring their options and working with legal counsel on what the next steps are and how else we can move this forward quickly.
Bill?
So let me review real quick here. You said 240 to 280. That's a $40,000 difference. Is there a item there that is an issue?
Yeah, Manager Olson, so within the bid items, right, there's some things that maybe have come in under bid, some things that maybe aren't needed, like seeding and restoration, so that's where that range comes in, on just knowing exactly what might be claimed.
Is that 83,000 retainer part of the 240?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I misspoke, so
Okay.
there's about 200,000 left in bid items, some of which may or may not apply.
Okay.
And then there's 83,000 that is in retainage.
Okay.
So that's where you get the 240 to 280.
Okay. Is there any work that you feel would be better done on frozen ground? Is that an issue? In other words, would it make more sense to do the work in February than May?
So Manager Olson, managers you know, when we originally looked at reconstructing the boardwalk, we wanted it constructed over the winter because of the risk of, you know, frozen conditions and the work that needed to be completed.
Yep.
What's a little bit more unclear now is that the structure's in place if all that work could be done from the existing structure. You don't have to worry about traveling, you know, like disrupting the wetland or worrying about spring flooding. That's where the means and methods comes into play and why we're asking to understand how they're going to do that, because then we can understand if we need to be applying deadlines over winter or spring or summer. I know that doesn't directly answer the question.
I'm just saying, in your opinion, would working during the winter be a more efficient way of doing it? Is it more expensive to do this correction when the ground is wet?
I'm not sure I can answer that.
Okay. It would seem to me, if I had a project in my backyard and I had still was holding $280,000 of the contractor's money, and I was very dissatisfied with their response, very dissatisfied with their work, that I wouldn't go to them to get this thing fixed. And I would just say, I want this done, I want it done right. I'm keeping your money, goodbye. Sue me, see how far you get. And then I would take that money and go out for bids for someone who knows what the heck to do right and get the job done. So chasing after a powdery entity is just not going to save us any legal fees. It's not going to save us any design fees. It's just going to cost and cost and cost. We've already been to court on this project. We've already been to hell and back on failures of the material the first time around. And I just think that it would make us a better use of the taxpayer's dollar than to hope that this contractor would be able to finish it up. That's just my opinion. I'm talking about a project in my backyard now. So I don't know how the rest of the board feels.
Well, that was kind of my question, was gonna be, can we just declare a default and hire a subcontractor?
So I think
But he's gonna have his lawyer sue us then.
Well, I think we could come up with some
yeah,
legal options
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
kind of,
yeah, I think that would make sense to Manager Loftus's point is, you know, come back at the December 28th, as you noted, staff explore options, work with legal counsel to outline for you all.
Some alternatives.
Yeah, what options we have to get this moving quickly. I think makes sense.
Mr. Smith?
Madam President, managers, you can be assured that we are working closely with the staff on all of the options that have been suggested. And we start, though, within the confines of an existing construction contract that does provide certain remedies and defines default and, has the performance bond. And so there are some remedies in place, but the options you've floated are included in what is being discussed.
But I also think we have to really work with St. Louis Park closely to make sure that we're on the same page as this. I don't want them walk away and St. Louis Park walk in the next day and say, no, this isn't right, and then all of a sudden, well, they said, no, you guys signed off on it.
Yeah, Manager Maxwell, that's something we've said that we're looking to help coordinate on, but because JTS is the contractor, the one didn't build up the plan and spec that the city approved,
Yeah.
the onus is on them. If they were proposed to build everything to all the corrections to plan and spec, they don't need any approvals from St. Louis Park, and everything's good to go. It's the fact that they have the right to propose alternatives as part of the process. Because they're proposing these two alternatives, that's why we need to go through all of this review process and technical information gathering and SRF review and the city St. Louis Parks review, because to Manager Loftus's point, we want to ensure that the proposals they put out meet or exceed the design intent that they originally bid on.
Yeah.
We're not looking to undermine
Undermine it, yeah.
Well,
is 2 weeks enough time to turn around a report on those options to come back? on December 28th? Okay, yeah. Then I'll make a motion to that effect, requesting staff work with legal counsel to come up with, oh,
No, you just, you're done.
sure.
Is there a way we can look at if the contractor is experiencing internal problems? That's why lack of help, or how do we find out if they're going to default because of internal problems?
Mr. Smith?
Madam President, Manager Sando, I think those kinds of questions occur to everyone involved. What in the heck is going on? And I don't think anyone has any adequate rational explanations. I can say that in our experience working with other water-related construction projects, it's been the last couple of years since the pandemic has been a difficult time in the construction industry generally, for a variety of reasons. And sometimes you're facing a situation where there is no longer a competent company left that you're dealing with. And so you make certain decisions about what your options are. And so we're left right now with a lot, we don't have information from JTS about explaining the lack of rational behavior.
There's a motion on the table to bring this back on the 28th with an update and a list of options to be discussed. May I have a second to that motion? Second for Manager Maxwell. Did you have another question, Manager Sando?
Good answer.
Then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Ms. Sharpley.
Good luck.
You used the word frustration. There are probably a lot longer list of words. Mr. Whisker.
Yes, President White, thank you. I'm gonna see if I can pull up a few slides. And if I can't, that'll be okay. I'm kind of buried. Give me 1 second.
Certainly. Thanks for your motion.
Just thinking. Still thinking. I was going to give a briefing with some color commentary and a few snapshot slides from the steering committee, and the presentation is so large and graphically rich, it's just choking on trying to open it. So while that spins, I'll move to other topics and see if it boots up, and then we'll come back to it. And if not, I'll just give a verbal report, and I'll look for President White and Manager Hedgemati and Mr. Smith to fill in gaps on how that steering committee went. Okay. Let's see, where do I want to start? So everybody at the dais has a copy of the Land and Water Partnership Initiative capstone publication. I think the board at a recent meeting, late November, approved the Land and Water Partnership policy and program. Those have hit the streets, so those were sent out December 4th to staff and councils at all of our member communities, all 29 communities. Those have also hit the desks of our state agency partners and key legislators. And in there, among other things, it's obviously highlighting the outcomes of this collaboration with our member communities. Really, I think a program for communities to get into our capital plan designed by those communities. And so scattered throughout, you'll see there's some key quotes from folks that have participated in the process and how the program reflects their input. So we have a pull quote from, I believe, the mayor of Deep Haven on the partnership and collaboration they felt in integrating water resources into their road reconstruction program, city engineers, community development staff, so a good cross-section of our municipal and land use partners. And that was part of our engagement and communication strategy coming out of the technical advisory committee process, is to get that out while also issuing the public notice for the adoption, or for the feedback and comment period on the rule revisions. And so that public notice should be, that the board has approved, should be going out, I think, on Monday, and we'll be targeting scooping up the feedback and reporting back to the board and having an actual public hearing on January 11th. So following that, we'll move through final revision process and adoption, and that should mark the conclusion of the last couple of years of engagement with our cities around the Land and Water Partnership Initiative, which is this road on-ramp into our capital plan, and then the streamlining of our water resource regulations. I'm going to see if I can share this slideshow, just to kind of give everybody a couple quick
Excellent.
snapshots.
Go.
It took quite a while, so I apologize for that. So I'm not going to give you the presentation, but I'll give you sort of a taste of what we covered. But the steering committee between the City of Minneapolis, the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, and the Watershed District met, would have been last Wednesday now, on December 6th, to get a briefing on our proposed partnership. So we stepped through what I think is our unique watershed context, so the upstream, downstream dynamics that we've experienced and been working on in the Greenway, and how that's provided context for the projects that we're proposing down in Minneapolis, and the governance structure, the partnership structure that comes along with moving those projects forward, as well as where we might go after this first round of pilot projects towards long-range planning. We had, the meeting was well attended, well run, and well participated in. The meeting was chaired by Councilmember Koski. We had Director Kelleher there, now Chief Operating Officer for Minneapolis, who was quite engaged and provided some constructive imprinting and leadership in the meeting. We had the Deputy Director of Public Works, so a good showing from the city. Councilmember Koski had also invited Irene Chaudhary, who's newly elected and now appointed, because she stepped in behind Andrew Johnson, council member, and it was great to have her perspective, having just been recently elected and campaigning and door knocking and hearing a lot about water. We had representative from the mayor's office, Suzanne Sabatka, Park Board Commissioners Musich, Benny, and then our board contingent, and President White, Manager Hemani, our Minneapolis resident, and Manager Miller, and then Lewis, who's there keeping us in order and taking notes. So I'm going to tick through, what the presentation, really how we frame things, and then a couple takeaways, and then if there's gaps that people want to fill, we can do that. Really kind of steps through some background, because the last time we were together with everybody was dealing with the Nakoma surface and groundwater issue. So kind of started off like, let's pick up where we left off, because it's been almost 500 days since we all got together and saw each other, and the context is different now than then. But we learned a lot from all the time that we spent together navigating the groundwater issues, and we learned a lot principally around the fact that climate change is already here, and as a region, the Twin Cities are getting warmer and wetter. And during that time period that we were engaged in Nakoma, it's just reminding everybody, we accumulated 3 additional feet of water, which is just an incredible amount over that time period. And when it's wet, even though we've had the the bust cycle of drought the last couple of years, the boom cycle that we've experienced impacts institutions, our public lands like the golf course. It's taxed infrastructure and damaged our natural systems. And it's brought attention through the Nokomis issue of these old land use decisions that we made as communities that are still impacting us today, like the historic filling of our region's wetlands. And in all of that, at the heart of it, people are impacted. And when people are impacted, they get engaged and they turn to local government and they want to know, why is my basement wet? And who's responsible or who's paying? And is this a local issue, or is there something happening upstream I need to know about? And how are the city or the park board and the district working together towards our sustainable future to address flooding and water quality? And so we had boiled down for the steering committee some of these, what we think are kind of meta lessons. Some of them resonate with the principles document that we put together, but that we as an organization need to do a better job of telling our story, because we have been doing a lot upstream and it's having a ton of benefit downstream. We've got to remain data driven to combat misinformation, but also make the wise, smart investments in that sustainable future. And I think we left the experience knowing there's work to be done in Minneapolis, so let's talk about that and have a sensible, balanced upstream, downstream approach. And I think importantly, to avoid being reactive and all the time and effort it takes when you're reacting, we should be proactive, and that requires us to work in partnership as a trio, the park board, the city, and the district. So we did let them know, hey, in the months following the Nokomis Town Hall, we took a step back and we thought, well, what have we been doing upstream, and why don't we tell that story? And so oriented people to the work that we've done upstream over the last decade, treating 2,300 acres of runoff in Richfield, St. Louis Park, Hopkins, Edina, all outside of the city, and profile the place and volume, place that we've been creating and the volume of water that we've managed and how much water quality benefit it had. So we kind of gave some hero shots of our projects upstream and downstream of the Greenway, and talked about 325 Blake Road, which when completed is estimated to treat an equivalent amount of nutrients as the entire city of Minneapolis' waste load allocation. What's that doing for Lake Hiawatha? And we've seen water quality trending positive. So the message here was, we think we've done decent upstream, and we've been telling that story. We've won a number of awards. We landed a front page article in the Strib, and our award-winning Watershed employee, Mike, was quoted in this article saying, we should come downstream and bring this program down there, because if we were able to deliver that kind of place and that kind of benefit in an industrial corridor, just think what we could do with the raw ingredients of the parkway that underpin our beloved regional park system and define the city of lakes. So we talked about the models of partnership from the 90s, the Clean Water Partnership, and how successful that was, and gave us a real pattern for how we might move forward. And we talked about some of the challenges with our 2018 MOU, and that it had a spirit of partnership. It wasn't necessarily concrete. It engaged staff, policymakers, and because water management in Minneapolis, I think we all know, is pretty complicated. So we talked about what makes it complicated, because that's the nut that we're trying to crack together. So we stepped through a simple slide build, which I think the committee discussed, how powerful the slides were in storytelling, and asked for more, essentially. So kudos to Alex there for visualizing a lot of data. But we talked about, there's 164 miles of pipe in Minneapolis, which convey runoff to 250 different outfalls and 8 lakes, which drain 6 square miles of pavement of our built environment. So it's just on a landscape basis complicated, but then there's a lot happening. There's a lot of work. And if you take just Cedar Master Plan, for example, we've got old storm water systems that were built in the 90s that need maintenance, and we've got new projects being proposed. And if you extended that to the full system, there's just a myriad of work being advanced or proposed by just the park board. And some of that work, like the Hiawatha Golf Course, is linked to flood mitigation in the grid for 1,500 acres of the city, which is what is being proposed at Harriet as well, to increase conveyance and to remove properties from the floodplain and store more of the water that's flooding the roads in pipes. And we said as a final layer of complexity, there's all this transportation infrastructure, some of which offers opportunities for benefit, some of it doesn't. So it's understandable, it's a lot to filter through and identify priority projects. So that provided the context for our proposal to focus on 3 pilots out of the Parkway, which wasn't invested in the 90s, and we ticked through the governance structure that would come along with that in the long-range planning, breaking the city into management units, looking at our partners' priorities, finding strategic alignment, and developing a cross-agency plan. And so where we left them is we've tried to cut through the complexity and get some early low-hanging fruit and wins that will help delist Hiawatha that are fully funded. We can figure out the more complicated stuff on a parallel timeline, and we've proposed a governance structure that has a technical team of staff filtering up recommendations to staff leadership, to the steering committee, that can be funneled out to the governing bodies of the city, the park board, and the district. So said I wasn't going to give the presentation, and then I did. But some of the take-home messages, we left them with next steps, and here's a few. They're low-res green grabs from folks in the room. Councilmember Koski really working to chair the meeting with Lewis, and a lot of engagement and discussion across the committee. And where we landed, I think some themes, and I'd ask others to weigh in, is there's just a tremendous amount of excitement. That was universal across everybody. And we're so excited to actually be here. It's taken so much work to get everybody into the room, and this feels like a once-in-a-generational opportunity. And we don't want to lose that moment or that momentum, because we should have been doing this since the 1990s. So we need to pick up the 90s work and carry it forward, moving forward. Margaret Anderson Kelleher said, I'm hearing this isn't a pilot program. This is just a program. This is phase 1 of many. So let's drop the word pilot, because language is important. Unanimous support for advancing feasibility for the projects, for the governance structure. I think showing the excitement and wanting to expand engagement. The steering committee discussed expanding membership. So moving from Councilmember Koski, they talked about including, we're 12 and what would it be, 13, 14, so it would be Irene Chowdhury and Vice President of the Council, Linda Palmisano, another Park Board Commissioner to be determined. Councilmember Koski had invited Margaret Kelleher in her new role to remain engaged, and I think she said absolutely. And there was a great conversation around the upstream, downstream water dynamics inside of the city. The park board and the city are trying to navigate, well, all the water's coming from the grid and it's entering the park system. Where are the balance of improvements upstream and on parkland? And we really want to understand that. And I think they're viewing us as part of helping them tease through that. I mentioned the maps. I think Commissioner Musich has said this is the first time I've seen a lot of this information all in one place, and what a story it tells. Wouldn't it be great if we could have a jointly branded website to communicate to the public how everything fits together? So communications and outbound communications to the community also was a big theme of discussion. So I think those were I gave you the presentation that I said I wasn't going to give. Those are my cliff notes, and I would look to President White, Arun, Lewis, or other staff members that were there to fill in gaps. But you can probably tell I left the meeting pretty excited. I'm still excited, and it's a week later that I think we accomplished everything that we were really looking to accomplish in that moment.
Would you like to weigh in?
Sure. I'll echo what you said, which was the fact that everybody was very enthusiastic about moving forward. And it was really reflected by everybody who was there. There was just a general agreement that this has to happen and we're going to do it. It really was a strength, and I think it was emphasized by the fact that Margaret Anderson Kelleher, even though she's now Director of Operations, wants to stay engaged in this. I didn't think she would even show up. I thought she just moved on, but she didn't. She not only showed up, but she said, I'm going to be in this for a long haul.
It's worthwhile.
Yes, and that's, to me, what that does is because she reports directly to the mayor, it speaks to me about the support, indirectly speaks to me about the support that the mayor is giving to this. Though I think the question that you asked is still valid, which is, I would like to a little more direct communication with the mayor saying that, not just these indirect implications, you know. And certainly Suzanne Swoboda was there, the senior aide for the mayor, and James, I think you're planning a meeting with her and
Yeah, that was one of the outcomes that I missed. I think President White had said, can we get an audience with the mayor? It's nice
Yeah.
that our representatives are engaged, but like sit down and really brief the mayor's office on the whole thing and catch them up. So that's another next step for us.
Yeah, so that we get a direct verbal commitment, if not from him, but at least from his representatives saying, we back you on it.
Yep.
You know, when I look at this, if we do what we're doing, what it's going to do is it's a win-win situation. We will get the project that we want, and the people who are in power will get the kudos for doing it. You know, like the three, like Parmisano and Emily and Orion will get the credit for, will be able to take the credit for this happening, you know. The mayor's office will be able to take the credit for it happening. So it's going to serve them just as well as it serves us. So for that reason, I see this moving forward, because it'll help them and it'll help us. It's a win-win situation. That's what I saw.
I was also very pleased that Margaret Kelleher was there. It showed a lot of commitment. And expanding the steering committee does also, getting all those council members who border the creek, and then the other pieces being raised also. So we'll have much better communication and momentum, or lost my vocabulary, but it just means a much better commitment, I think.
Yes, strong commitment. The piece that I see where work is really needed on this is the communication piece.
Yeah.
And I imagine that what we're going to have to do is have Koski and probably Oreen and the park board and us come together and use the park board's resources. They're very good at outreach for people, you know, outreach to tell the story. You know, when I was at Nina, when the Parkway plan, you know, when it was beginning, they sent a person from the park board to come to our, you know, come to Nina and tell us about it. That's how I learned about it. And the fact that they, you know, that she came in and spoke to us led me to start to attend the meetings and become enthusiastic about it. And so if we can come together and put something together like that, I think that's where the work is.
And we committed to bringing a steering committee together in May.
In May.
Yeah, so
And
there's a commitment
yeah.
to a next meeting, not a year and a half.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And they said next May.
Mm-hmm.
And that will be after, we're anticipating first quarter, the agreement, the request for proposals, and the formal appointment as steering committee members would make its way through council board and our board first quarter, and then we'd regroup in May, really kind of focused on progress report and next steps. So,
Did anybody step up and say that entity would be taking a lead role?
we are the leaders per the cooperative agreement. So I mean, we convened, we're leading the project feasibility, and we'll negotiate at key gates post feasibility based on what's feasible and the order of the projects, how we advance design. But generally, the park board and the city are looking for us to lead the project work and the long-range planning work. So I think with regards to communications, it's all of that's going to be a team effort, but we're going to be the engine.
Yes.
It keeps driving people together to deal with the communications, the mapping, the projects.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
and it's because we are driving it that I think it will be successful.
Sorry.
Steve?
James, I think it's a great idea to proceed with showing what we've done upstream, and we can duplicate that downstream, you know, the erosion and water problems with the storm sewers and so forth. Think of that.
And Lewis was there at the beginning, so
Yeah.
we did get a chance to debrief while I was cooking. He called me while I was cooking macaroni and cheese for the boys, so it wasn't a thorough debrief, but I'm not sure if you have any reflections.
Yeah,
on where
Louis,
we are
I'm interested
relative to
in hearing what you have to say.
the 90s.
I think it was a very successful meeting. The first thing I want to say is how incredibly well prepared the meeting was by Minnehaha Creek Watershed District staff.
Outstanding.
It was really very, very impressive. And I went through, I think, 5 dress rehearsals of the meeting or something like that. Second thing I need to say is that James' presentation, as you can see, but as it was delivered, was very impactful. And so that set a tone. I do think it's very encouraging, given all that our Minneapolis council members are dealing with, that they're tuning in this much to these issues is a good thing. What's different than the 1990s is, you know, that the mayor in the 1990s personally wanted to put a stamp on gathering all these, you know, players to make this partnership and have the city lakes benefit. And our situation now is that the Minneapolis mayor has a lot of other things on his plate that weren't there in the 1990s in the same way. I do think that expanding the steering committee was a good thing. It means that there will be 4 representatives of the city of Minneapolis, the mayor, and 3 council members. There'll be 3 park board commissioners and then 3 watershed managers. And I think all of that is great. And I think we all made the calculus that it's far more beneficial to have that engagement from the council members in the budget process, owning the need for supporting this work. And there won't be a situation where it's, you know, like, I don't know, some kind of worrying about counting votes on the steering committee. And then we did flag the need to work on communications together. Just, I think that's a good preventative medicine, but also a proactive thing. So that's what I recall.
Thanks, Lewis.
Yeah, one of the things I would like to see is some kind of a plan coming back on the communications, okay?
Very good. I think that is the plan, so.
Yeah, you know what Margaret Anderson Kelleher said during the meeting was really significant. She said, it's much worse to leave out someone. It's really very bad to leave out people. You must include as many people as you can. Essentially, she was saying, be inclusive. And so our communication strategy needs to have that at its heart, the inclusion. Who do we include and how do we include them? How do we go about doing that?
I'm excited. Seems like Manager has an audience too.
Yes, I'm extremely excited.
Very good. Well, Mike is on screen and not feeling 100%, and the audio is not perfect, and we can't see him. So I think we were planning on having, you know, mild celebration and showing the video clip, the tearjerker video clip that we recorded, and the response of the reading in from Bowser in response to the crowd. But we'll save that for when Mike's here in the flesh. It was pretty fun recently. Because he was
still in Hawaii.
He probably is.
Went back.
He wasn't able to make the meeting, and so Bowser came here for our all-hands meeting recently to hand off the physical plaque, and that was kind of a cool moment too.
Very nice.
On the staff front, we have Maggie Menden here tonight. She gave her first presentation. She's also, I want to congratulate her and acknowledge to the board that she's just stepped into a position of being a permitting technician from a permitting assistant through our internal hiring processes. Abby left us to go work with Carver County WMO, and through that internal process, it was sort of one of those no-brainer moments. We're just really excited about the energy that she's bringing. And she's already demonstrated just a strong appetite for continuing to improve everything permitting related. So that's going to be great. I don't think that there's going to be a super steep learning curve there, and we're very happy to have her energy. And the final thing that I'll finish with, and we might do something a little bit more formal at a subsequent meeting, is a quick brief out. I got in, it's probably why I'm stumbling a little bit, I got in about 1 o'clock last night from San Francisco from the American Geophysical Union that I attended with Brian, Alex, and Becky. And it's definitely up Brian's alley. It is so intensely academic. My brain hurt for 4 days. The sessions are really intense. They're about 5 90-minute sessions a day, and the 90-minute sessions are essentially 10-minute briefings from 9 different people in academia that have done incredible climatological and land geophysical studies. And so you're getting 9 different peer-reviewed literature presentations every session, and there's 5 of those a day. So they had a lot of coffee breaks, which was helpful. But some of the takeaways that I had the first day, I was asking myself, why did I do this? Because I sat through probably 2-3 hours of dynamic downscaling of climate modeling. And a lot of it was over my head, but some of the things that I learned is that the global climate models, when you apply them regionally, don't match what we're seeing locally. And so there's a huge push to dynamically downscale those. And some examples of them doing that were taking the global climate models and adding in really high resolution oceanographic temperature data and land surface data and producing better predictions for West Coast drought and Gulf hurricane dynamics. And when they did that, they started to see those models now produce what we've actually been observing. So sort of a validation and a calibration at the same time. And in the downscaling, which they're doing all across the globe, there was a great example of how they did it in Shanghai, where the storms that they were seeing that really impacted people weren't predicted by the modeling. They included urban heat island and the convection effects of the heat island on spinning up these weather patterns and intensifying them that were entering the city. And when they did that, it represented the recent storms that they'd seen. So the science is there. And what was really interesting is that the academic communities, climate scientists, have great forecasts. They know what the impacts are going to be. The models match what we're observing. And they've really calculated what the future losses are going to be economically, which is really powerful. And in a lot of instances, they know what the engineering solutions are. So it was extremely hopeful. And then the big takeaway after that, and sort of stepping stones through the conference, was, why is nobody listening? There was a real emphasis on, there's a huge gap between what we know and action being taken, and not climate mitigation, the adaptation that we're talking about, that the information's there and we're not adapting fast enough. And so there's a lot of lamenting between the scientists. I'm like, we want to stop short of lobbying. We're not policymakers, but we need governance structures to take up this science. Right. I'm like, I'm in my zone. This is great. So there was a big focus on adaptation. I think during the Q&A session, for one of the sessions, they called it the elephant in the room. There were 22,000 people here talking about everything that we know and just refining the modeling and making it better and better. But how do we as a team of 22,000 scientists drive action? And what's our role in that? So the information exchange and pulling that into governance structures and communication was a massive takeaway and starting to become a big theme in the conference. Of the actions that are being taken, there was a really cool session on the academic review, quantitative review of climate policies. Are they working? And they evaluated, for example, in Sweden, which has an 8-party unit of government, the policies being proposed by all the different candidates and quantified how many metric tons of carbon would be sequestered or released. And generally then looked at Canada and a couple of other areas. And the takeaway for me there was on a macro coarse grain assessment. They were saying that policies fall into kind of 2 general camps. They're either regressive in the instance of some of the more right-wing parties in Sweden, the policies would roll back. And just like we've seen recently here, and there would be a tripling of emissions from Sweden. And of the progressive policies that are being proposed, a lot of them might not make a huge difference, that they were almost performative. And so that was a really big takeaway too, is that there are scientists out there studying the quantitative impact of the policies, and they sort of fell into those two camps. So simultaneously hopeful and discouraging that there's this big gap between the science and the policy making. And then there was a community and society track, which was sort of like the, alpha was the science and omega was like the people and the community and what are people's perspectives. And there was an amazing piece where they looked at, for forest fires, hurricanes, rains, all the different sorts of intense weather, what's the science telling us about how much climate is attributed to the intensity of those sorts of weather patterns? And then how much do people attribute climate to those weather patterns? And they did a huge demographic breakdown. It wasn't really a surprise, like, well, there's a big political difference in ideology, but as they parsed it down further and further, there's some real takeaways that people that have experienced these things, regardless of political ideology, you can really move if you're not talking about climate, but you're talking about the event. And so there's a big takeaway there that I think resonates with us, is we really need to be talking about intense flooding, because it doesn't matter where you fall or what your perspective is. If you've experienced that, which we've seen in all parts of the watershed, talking about flooding will really move people on policy in a constructive direction. And then finally there was a really cool session on how the formulae for community truths, which in other words is how groups of people define what they think is true, and how narratives trump models every day of the week. And they talked about this community out in the Missouri River Basin, and that really blames the Corps of Engineers for how they're managing a dam, because they said the Corps is managing the dam for recreation, and they care more about the freaking fish, was one of the pull quotes from the community capacity assessment, than they do about people's lives. And I thought, well, there's some kind of parallels there from things that we've heard about, well, why is Minnehaha Creek managing the dam this way or that way? And there was a real quantitative assessment of how do you move belief systems that have already established in community on kind of a belief, norm, value basis, and that in those instances, having the science and producing the tools doesn't get you there. And that it was all about how people access and consume information they trust, which is really surprising. It was really neat to see these scientists breaking it down into a framework. And in those instances, in these rural communities, they weren't using social media. They were getting their news from, the local TV, or they said, I call Tom because he lives down by the river, and he'll tell me if it's flooding. Mm-hmm. And they go to community-based organizations and community leaders that they trust, and we've worked with some of those people that they're the brokers of the information coming from the agencies and disseminating that into the community. And that's one of the examples of how community truths are formed, or misinformation is formed. And they really talked a lot about how to map community and how important it is to have a strategy of disseminating information in a way that reflects how communities are going to consume it versus how we think they want to consume it if you want to move them long term, which is really what we've been talking about in Minneapolis. And this presentation is, how do we rewind a narrative that took 8 years to form? And it's been an incredible amount of work telling our story about upstream. And we had, some of the members from the Nokomis community attend a recent board meeting and say, we learned a lot. But that was a lot of work, and I think the sessions from the forecast data to the gap between science and policy, to what policies are being implemented and how effective they are, to how do you move community, it was really, really valuable. I'm not sure if I'll need to go back next year because my brain still hurts, but it felt so applicable to what we're working on. So I think Alex and Brian and I all on different levels. I think Alex and Brian understood a lot more of it than I did, but we were able to really riff, and I think are excited to bring some of the learnings back. So it was a good conference.
Great.
In a nutshell, very big nutshell. That's what I have for you for the admin report, a little bit longer than usual, but some
Thank you very much.
good meat to cover.
The meeting is adjourned.